Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.
To have the federal government making us more vulnerable and trying to charge us more money for it, that's wrong.
Louisiana's Garrett Graves and our ongoing coastal and flood problems and how an epic hurricane season could impact flood insurance. Hi, everyone. I'm Andre Morrow. More on a national flood insurance program in a moment. But right now on the state we're in, so far this hurricane season, Louisiana has been spared a direct hit, but we are still storm weary. For 3 continuous weeks, we've worried and been on guard with concerns about Harvey and now Irma with what could still come. That topic leads us into the first of the week's headlines. Governor John Bel Edwards wants Congress to ease a restriction on benefits that flood victims get from the federal government to help rebuild homes. He says the restriction has caused problems for our state trying to recover from the widespread flooding of 2016. Survivors of Hurricane Harvey and likely Hurricane Irma could be in the same boat. Why? FEMA encourages people to apply for small business loans, but it's a catch-22 for those who qualify. They find themselves not eligible for the most generous of federally backed grants to rebuild homes at a later date. Because of Hurricane Harvey, the demand for new cars is putting a squeeze on supply throughout the Gulf states and beyond. Floodwaters damaged or destroyed about 500,000 vehicles in the Houston area. Edmunds.com says the rush is on to replace those, and customers, they say, are more likely to buy new and not used vehicles. The success of Louisiana-based restaurants expanding nationally continues. Popeyes and Cane's did it with fast food. Baton Rouge-based Walk-Ons is doing it with its sports bar brand. Food News Media says Walk-Ons has 106 franchise commitments in the works to put the chain in 13 states. The recipe for success is people like their food first and Louisiana-style foods in general. Liquor sales add big profit return. Walk-Ons also got a boost with the addition of Saints quarterback Drew Brees as a brand ambassador. A third sperm whale found dead on a sandbar just off Grand Isle has researchers scrambling for answers. The 20 to 30-foot whale that washed ashore was the 5th stranding of this endangered species in the northern Gulf of Mexico. Wildlife officials hope to find answers to this anomaly. You know, when we had our unnamed flood disasters a year ago, the National Flood Insurance Program, though imperfect, proved vital in getting people back into their homes. Can it continue to do that with our current hurricane frenzy? LPB's Kelly Spires is here with more on that story. Kelly.
Thank you, Andre. The program is more than $20 billion in debt, due in large part to hurricanes Katrina, Rita, and Sandy. I spoke with Congressman Garrett Graves about what's ahead with Congress. It's set to take a look at the program in the coming weeks. The National Flood Insurance Program, which is administered through FEMA, is up for reauthorization in Congress next month. I'm wondering if you might have some insight on how the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey will adjust the political landscape and potentially affect that program's passage.
Sure. Well, look, the National Flood Insurance Program is one of many niche areas where you don't have a lot of people that truly understand the mechanics of the program. We have spent a lot of time meeting with dozens of members of Congress from around the country, helping them to understand some of the challenges with the program, challenges with the solvency of the program, the using actuarial rates and the sustainability of the program. I think that what Hurricane Harvey is going to do is it's going to really bring this issue to the forefront. It's going to force many people to truly dig into it and understand the mechanics, because some of the proposals put forth right now will really cause the detriment of many communities in Texas and Louisiana and other places if significant changes are not made to the program in its current form and to legislation that currently is moving its way through Congress.
What could happen to Louisianians if the program isn't passed? But the better question might be what could happen if the program isn't fixed?
Well, first of all, there have been instances in the past where the program has lapsed, meaning that the program has expired, but in every instance, Congress has come back and retroactively restored the program. Look, I'm not advocating for that. I hope it never happens, but certainly I don't see a scenario where Congress would allow a gap to stay in place for any period of time. They would definitely come back and address that lapse or retroactively apply. Moving forward, when you look at the program in terms of the amount of dollars that have been paid out, the amount of premiums that have been collected, the program is actually in the black. Whenever you add in all of the commissions that have been collected, the administrative charges, and largely inefficiencies in the administration of the program shows it's in the red. But I think that is it's not an accurate depiction of the solvency of the program. Further, when you come in and you take some of the real outliers of events, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, perhaps even the 1,000-year flood we had last August, you can't expect a flood insurance program to cover some of these catastrophic events. You can expect it to be there for conventional floods, for regular hurricanes. But when you have these real outlier events, these real catastrophic events, you can't expect this program to cover those things. That's when Congress needs to step in, just like we did for 9/11, and we should have. Now, I think we need to flip the paradigm over, because the reality is that policyholders have paid over $40 billion in premiums. What that's done is that's reduced liability for the U.S. Treasury and taxpayers around the country for some of these catastrophic disasters. So we really have a big education process to go through, and I think we've got to make some other policy reforms, and I'll give you one other idea, something that's really important. Right now, as a Congress and within the federal government, you have agencies from Department of Interior, Department of Commerce, Department of Transportation, Corps of Engineers, FEMA, that are all spending dollars on different resiliency programs. But none of them are looking at the liability under the flood insurance program, necessarily looking at where you have pockets or concentration of vulnerable properties. So we've got to do a better job connecting where we're spending our resiliency and flood protection dollars versus where there's liability within the federal government. Any company would be doing that, and the federal government's failing at it in their disjointed management.
Is there something that you wished folks in D.C. understood about the environment in Louisiana? That
I do, and I'll tell you one thing that drives me crazy, but it's largely a Louisiana-centric issue. The fact that we really have become more vulnerable in South Louisiana. That's a fact. But the primary reason we've become more vulnerable is because of the federal government's actions, because of how they have historically and currently are managing the Mississippi River system and the Atchafalaya River. As a result of that, we have lost extraordinary swaths of land across South Louisiana, putting the Gulf of Mexico that much closer to our communities. So are we really more vulnerable from an actuarial perspective? Absolutely. But you cannot make us more vulnerable and then come back and charge us due to your irresponsible actions. And to have the federal government making us more vulnerable and trying to charge us more money for it, that's wrong, and we're fighting that.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Congressman.
You bet. Thank you.
There is good news and bad news about a new report on jobs in our state, the report published by the Louisiana Budget Project. They discovered that while employment is up, job growth isn't keeping pace with population growth. Kelly Spires takes a look at this.
Jeannie Donovan and Nick Alvarez are senior policy analysts at the Louisiana Budget Project. That's a think tank that advocates for low and middle income households. In a recent report, they analyzed job opportunities across the state.
The good news is that Louisiana has, since the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009, gained back all of the jobs it lost, plus added an additional 54,000 jobs. The bad news is that job growth is not keeping pace with population growth, and so that creates a jobs gap.
Louisiana was hit twice by recessions. Employment numbers first showed the effects of the Great Recession of 2007-2009.
If we look at trends over time, we see a kind of a double dip for Louisiana. Post-recession, we were climbing back, but then in 2015, when oil prices went down, we really see a dip in the jobs numbers and in how workers are faring in the state.
And jobs in the energy industry are high-quality, high-paying jobs. Not all of those have come back.
The other piece of bad news is that many of the jobs that we're adding and the sectors that are growing in our state are creating jobs that are low-wage jobs, particularly in the hospitality and leisure industries, and also in the education and health sectors.
And there's been uneven rebounding across the state. Southwest Louisiana, Lake Charles, has been up since the recession and since the oil slump.
So we know that liquid natural gas facilities are being built there. So that is a region that's really seen a dramatic increase in jobs, particularly in the construction industry. New Orleans and Baton Rouge also have seen modest job growth since the recession and in the last 12 months. However, home of Thibodaux, Shreveport, Alexandria, these are areas that have actually seen job loss since the recession and in the last 12 months.
Another downside to the employment picture is that wages have not kept up with worker productivity. Gross state product has grown 17% since the year 2000.
The median wage in our state has grown by only 4% during the same time period. And so we know that workers are not getting, their wages are not being increased, they're not getting the comprehensive benefits as a result of increased productivity.
Donovan's report says that many jobs in Louisiana don't offer what the United Way has dubbed a living wage. That's enough to meet the costs of a family of 4 with 2 small children. It comes out to be a little over $46,000 a year.
For the workers who do have jobs, many of them are earning wages that don't pay enough to afford the basic survival budget. For many others, especially in particular regions of the state, they're having trouble finding work at all.
Just as well-being is uneven across the state, it's uneven for different people in Louisiana.
The wage gaps that we see along gender lines, along race lines, and level of education have really persisted for decades, and in some cases gotten worse.
The gap between what the median white worker makes and what the median black worker makes has actually grown since 1979 as white wages have increased more rapidly.
While we know that a myriad of factors play into wage gaps, research tells us that discrimination is a piece of it, and that that discrimination must be addressed if we're going to close these wage gaps that have persisted for decades.
There are several policy recommendations in the report that focus on growing job numbers, increasing wages, closing the wage gap, and access to education. Many of their recommendations would initially cost the state's already troubled budget. But Donovan says that's not the only thing to consider.
It's really about looking at that cost-benefit analysis and looking at where can the state really invest and get a great return. And I think many of our recommendations offer that.
Donovan's work stems from a principle she believes in.
All Louisiana workers deserve access to a job that pays enough for them to afford basic necessities for themselves and their families. And what we found is that that's not the reality for many workers in our state.
So now we look at a surge in crime this year in the state's 3 largest cities. It's prompted mayors and police chiefs to address concerns and calm the public's fears. It's been addressed several times in New Orleans. Shreveport's chief of police had a news conference in late June, and just this week, the Baton Rouge mayor and also police chief did the same. Kelly Spires talks with a state criminalist about this.
From Shreveport to the capital city to New Orleans, homicides are up this year over last. I'm here with Paul Guidry, a criminologist from Baton Rouge Community College, to talk about what causes crime. Thanks for being here, Paul.
Thank y'all very much.
So let's start there. What are the root causes of crime?
One of the things you probably want to look at is probably unemployment is always an issue we can look at, but in addition to that, some things we can look at is some of the social institutions within the community with regards to education, access to adequate mental health facilities, health care. All those are some of the dynamics that you could look at in terms of some of the sources of crime that could be causing this problem that we see now in the state.
I've heard of this theory called social disorganization. and it's my understanding that the flood that happened, at least in the capital area, could be affecting crime in Baton Rouge, at least in theory. Could you explain that theory to me?
Yeah, social disorganizational theory kind of focuses on particular areas of a community that have experienced a lot of blight, a lot of unemployment, disenfranchisement, discrimination, educational issues. Some of all those are social institutions that are vital in bringing about a cohesiveness within the community. And if we are lacking in those areas, in certain areas of our community, then it's quite possible that crime could possibly come to those areas. And with the flood affecting all areas of Baton Rouge, in particular North Baton Rouge, that may have increased the possibility. What you may have is people being displaced, then they come back, or maybe a criminal element comes within those displaced areas and then begins the process of starting up maybe some sort of criminal enterprises. But in addition to that, social disorganization may lead to what's also called strain theory. You have individuals that are already living in blighted areas. Now all of a sudden a flood comes, what little they have is taken from them. They start to experience this strain, is what we call it. They no longer have the means to possibly achieve the goals in terms of paying for electric bill, putting food on the table, and then they may go out and commit some sort of criminal act, or just the strain in and of itself may cause them to act out violently towards individuals. And then in addition to that, we also have to worry about maybe a gang element. That's where your cultural deviance comes in. Members in that community feel that they're being ignored, they're not being listened to by the government and whatnot. And so then they totally dismiss the middle class values that many Americans adhere to, and then come up with their own sort of values and whatnot to achieve whatever it is they need to achieve. And sometimes by doing that, crime is one of the elements or one of the things they'll use in order to access some of the things that you and I may take for granted. They may not be able to purchase this or that, but use that gang mentality to facilitate some type of monetary compensation. Survivability is ultimately what it is.
I don't want to be overly sensational here. Crime is up year over year, but there were periods of Louisiana's history and the history of the nation that crime has been much higher.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If you go back, anybody can access that. If you go back to 1994, crime has actually been going down. For the most part, there have been upticks, but nothing that I would find alarming. But ever since the 1980s, when we had the crack cocaine epidemic, when that kind of enveloped, kind of took over the country, going from the west to the east coast, that's when you start to see the mass incarceration build up, locking more people up, kind of arresting their way out of the problem. But of course, that was ultimately one of the reasons why crime went down, is because of these prisons that were built and incarcerating individuals. There are some downsides to that, but overall, crime has been going down since 1994.
Let's talk about some of the conventional ways that cities try to tackle the crime problem. What's on the table for officials to turn to and implement?
I think right now is what you see in Baton Rouge is kind of like the Brave Unit, and you've seen the current chief. They are doing it in New Orleans, and I'm sure in Shreveport as well, where they will use intelligence-led policing. And what it is kind of like a problem-oriented policing philosophy is what we call it. We'll look for the hot spots within a certain community where a lot of crimes or call for services occurring, and then we'll look for the hot times, is the terminology that they use to say, okay, at what time are these things are occurring, and then start directing patrol officers to those locations to possibly, deter people from doing crime, but also making contact and starting to either arrest, summons, or write names down of individuals who may be partaking in these violent crimes. And thus we can get that intelligence and then share it with other agencies to hopefully see where all the connections are, because individuals are connected to a lot of other individuals when it comes to criminal enterprises. And so knowing one could lead us to 10 more individuals that may be associated with that particular individual. And thus we'll be able to keep maybe some sort of track on them to maybe hopefully prevent something later on down the road. I think it does work. But ultimately, we still need to look at some things when it comes to employment, the school system. We need to look at those underlying themes as well. If we're going to use social disorganization as the theory, then intelligence-led policing is great, but we also can't ignore the underlying themes that cause crime, like unemployment, education, healthcare. Those things are concerning as well. I just hope that at some point that we can all come together and resolve this crime problem. Crime doesn't do any good for anybody. It does not discriminate at all, and it affects all of us. It may not be in your neighborhood, it may not affect you directly, but at the end of the day, it is actually a concern for all of us to be aware of.
Well, thank you so much, Paul.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
And Kelly, thank you so much for that and all those stories, in fact. Well, we're more than a week away from the PBS Ken Burns special, The Vietnam War, and we're paying tribute to Louisiana veterans in the Vietnam War. So with that in mind, Breaux Bridge native and Vietnam vet Vincent Alexander received advanced infantry and jungle training at the U.S. Army base at Fort Polk. Sharpshooter, grenade launcher, and specialist on 81 millimeter mortar fire, Alexander served his country proudly, and he credits his faith as the reason he came back alive.
When I completed the training in Fort Polk, especially when I did the jungle training, I knew what I was up against when they told me I was going to Vietnam. It was almost like I do now, going hunting, rabbit hunting, researching in the woods and looking to search and destroy. That's really what we were ordered to do, destroy and kill the enemy. And it wasn't like you walking on dry land. It was jungles where someone had to use a machete and cut a way through, so that we could, because we were going to single file until we'd have to either stay there for the night and dig in, or spread out if we were under enemy fire. So when we got deeper into that jungle, they opened fire on us. We didn't know we was in the Viet Cong base camp. Then we were ordered to run out and go to the surrounding area. Only 12 of us made it out of the 28. 12 survived. The rest, they all got killed in there. I was injured. It was an incident where they told us we surrounded a Viet Cong village. I was a gunner on the mortar then. We had to, when we surrounded them, we caught them off guard and we started just dropping mortars. I didn't have no earplugs. And my ears started draining blood was draining out of both of my ears. And what happened was, they flew me to a hospital in Vung Tau. After I got well, they brought me back in combat again. I used to see people get killed every day, and I knew that it's possible that it could happen to me, but I did what I had to do.
Do we ever appreciate your service there, sir? You can catch this story and others that showcase the integral role Louisiana people and places played in the Vietnam War on Sunday night, September 17th at 8:30. That will follow as a reminder the premiere of The Vietnam War, a film by Ken Burns and Lynn Novick. That's September 17th at 7 p.m. on LPB and PBS. And online right now at lpb.org, you can hear it firsthand, Vietnam oral histories, interviews with Louisiana Vietnam veterans. It's part of our Louisiana Digital Media Archives. You know, in June, LPB reported on the work of John DeSantis in uncovering the Thibodaux Massacre of 1887. Finally, this week, the local government recognized the event also.
The Thibodaux City Council has moved to memorialize the victims of a racially motivated massacre that occurred 130 years ago. There will be a moment of silence in November across the city to honor the 30 to 60 victims. Thibodaux Mayor Tommy Eshte gave a descendant of a man who was wounded in that violence a proclamation declaring this November 23rd as 1887 Commemoration Day.
And whereas this incident, commonly referred to as the Thibodaux Massacre, has contributed to racial misunderstandings and distrust to the present day, whereas the full number of dead has never been determined, but the names of 8 victims are confirmed by the historical record, and whereas descendants and relatives of some of these victims still live in Thibodaux today, and whereas Jack Conrad, a U.S. Army veteran, father of the aforesaid Grant Conrad, and brother-in-law of Marcellin Welton, aided collection of witnesses' accounts and related his own experience of being wounded, as indicated in the U.S. Naval Archives, to federal investigators. And whereas an investigation of a site where victims are believed buried is underway, and whereas the city of Thibodaux condemns the violence that occurred on November 23, 1887, and acknowledging its extrajudicial and legal nature.
History itself is a part of everything, and I believe when we go forward, everybody will look at this as to say, you know what, it did happen, we've acknowledged it, and we need to move forward in bringing everyone together. I think the divisiveness that we have already in our nation perhaps has caused other divisions in our communities. And I believe this is a means to put certain things behind us and move forward in mending fences.
LPB will continue to follow this story and other important events across the state right here on Louisiana, the state we're in. And that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch LPB on demand on your phone or tablet with our LPB Anywhere app. The download is free from your app store. You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows as well as other Louisiana programs that you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook as well. For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow. Thanks for watching. Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and visit lpb.org, where you can view more stories and leave us a comment. This program is available on DVD. Support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum. Located in Jennings City Hall, the museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is a historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. Additional support provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and viewers like you.